Once upon a time, in a peaceful village called Cambole, where everyone lived happily, the village was surrounded by lush, tall trees, and the inhabitants followed special rules. One of the most important rules was that all girls had to remain pure, meaning they had to stay virgins until marriage. This rule was very special to the people of Cambole, and they ensured that all girls followed it diligently. The parents of Cambole were very proud of this tradition. They believed their daughters were pure and deeply cherished this conviction. Often they boasted among themselves, saying things like, "My daughter is pure, just like all the girls in our village." It was a point of pride for them and a sign of their good upbringing and respect for their customs. However, one day, something unexpected happened. A terrible misfortune struck the village. To lift this curse, it was revealed that only a true virgin could be the solution. There was also a promise that the young virgin who participated in the sacrifice would marry the prince, and her parents would receive many gifts and money. Excited by the prospect of their daughters becoming part of the royal family, all the parents eagerly brought their daughters to the palace, certain that their daughters were virgins, eager to win the prize and restore peace to the village. As the crowd gathered, Abele stepped forward with a large pot in his hands. He addressed everyone, saying, "In this pot is a special necklace blessed by the gods. Only a true young virgin can retrieve it. This is the test the gods have given us to find the one who will perform the sacrifice." The girls lined up nervously while their parents watched with confidence. One by one, the girls reached into the pot, but each time, they came out empty-handed. The atmosphere grew tense as the first girl tried, then the second, and so on. Each one failed, and the murmurs among the crowd grew louder. Then came the turn of the chief's daughters, known for their grace and beauty. The first daughter stepped forward confidently but also failed to retrieve the necklace. The second daughter tried but failed as well. Finally, the youngest daughter reached in, trembling, but she too found nothing. The villagers were stunned. Murmurs arose. "How is this possible? Not even the chief's daughters?" The elders exchanged worried, perplexed looks. They had always believed the village's girls were pure, upholding the traditions they cherished. But now, it seemed something had gone terribly wrong. The news of the test's failure spread quickly through the village, causing disbelief and shock. The girls began to cry out, "It's not our fault. It's because of that outsider, Isime." Rumors spread, and attention turned to Isime, the stranger from the city. The villagers began to murmur, blaming her for the chaos and misfortunes that had struck their peaceful village. "She came here and changed everything," muttered an old woman. "Our girls followed the traditions, and now look what's happened." Another villager, Akessa, said, "Isime brought city ways to our village. She made the girls forget who they are." And so, the story begins. Long ago, a young girl named Isime came to visit her aunt in the village of Cambole. Isime came from the big city and was very beautiful. She always wore colorful, revealing clothes that drew everyone's attention. Isime walked through the village with confidence as if she were a queen, and everyone noticed her, especially the men. As Isime passed by, the men whispered, "Wow, look at her. She's so beautiful." The village girls watched her too. They admired how she dressed and walked, wishing they could be like her. "I want to wear clothes like Isime," said one girl. Another added, "She looks so confident and pretty." The village girls didn't know much about Isime, but they were fascinated by her. They loved how she seemed so different and exciting. Isime's bright clothes and confident walk were unlike anything they had ever seen. They began to wonder what it would be like to receive the attention Isime got. "Isime is so cool," said one of the girls. "I want to be like her." And so, they watched her closely, hoping to learn more about her, and maybe become like her one day. But they didn't know that Isime had a secret that would change everything in the village. Isime had a secret that no one in the village knew. The men who admired her beauty gave her gifts and money, but it wasn't just because she was pretty. Isime met these men in secret, and in exchange for their gifts, she spent time with them in a way the village would not approve of. One day, Achala, the chief's daughter, became curious about why Isime always seemed to have new things and money. Achala decided to discreetly follow Isime to find out what was going on. She saw Isime meet a man in a hidden place, and then Isime left with a small bag of money. Achala was shocked and thought, "So that's Isime's secret. The men give her gifts to be with her." She wondered if she could receive gifts too. Achala had always been a good girl, following the village's rules, but now she was curious. She wanted to feel special like Isime. The next day, Achala saw a young merchant who had been watching her for a while. She decided to try what she had seen Isime do. Achala spoke to the merchant and agreed to meet him in secret. The merchant gave her gifts and money, just as he had done with Isime. Achala was thrilled and felt special. "This is so easy," she thought. "I can have nice things too." She felt like she had discovered something incredible and was eager to tell her friends. But she didn't know that this secret would bring big changes to the village. Achala couldn't keep her discovery to herself. She told her friends about Isime's secret and how easy it was to get gifts and money from men. "All you have to do is spend time with them, and they give you nice things," Achala explained. Her friends were shocked at first, but then became curious too. Soon, more and more village girls began to follow Isime's example. They started wearing makeup and dressing in ways to attract men's attention. The girls wanted to feel special and receive gifts like Isime and Achala. They whispered among themselves, "If Isime and Achala can do it, why can't we?" Isime noticed the change in the village girls and saw an opportunity. She began organizing meetings between the girls and men, taking a share of the gifts and money the girls received. Isime told them, "I'll take care of everything. You just have to be nice to the men." The girls trusted her and followed her instructions. They loved the attention and the gifts they received from the men. They felt special and enjoyed the new things they could buy with the money. They began to forget the village's important traditions, like staying pure and respecting themselves. The excitement of receiving gifts made them forget the values they had grown up with. As more and more girls joined what seemed like a secret club, they kept it all hidden from their parents and the village elders. The girls thought they were having fun, but they didn't realize the trouble they were getting into. The secret spread, and it changed the village in unexpected ways. Over time, more and more girls in the village began joining Isime's secret meetings with men. What started as a few girls seeking gifts became a common practice. The girls met men not only for gifts, but also for the attention and excitement it brought them. They felt admired and special, and that feeling became more important than the gifts themselves. The elders and parents of the village had no idea what was happening. They went about their daily lives, believing the village's traditions were still being followed. The elders often spoke about the importance of purity and respect, thinking the girls were listening and following their teachings. They didn't know that the strong tradition of keeping girls pure until marriage was being broken. The girls kept the secret well. They behaved normally with their families, attended village gatherings, and participated in daily chores. But behind closed doors, they led a different life, one that went against everything the village stood for. The taboo of meeting men in secret had become the norm among the village girls. They no longer felt shame or guilt for their actions. Instead, they saw it as a new way of life, one that offered them freedom and attention. They had drifted away from the values they were taught, and the once strong traditions were silently crumbling, unnoticed by the elders and parents. One day, something terrible happened in the village of Cambole. The plants began to wilt, their leaves turning brown and dry. The animals, usually full of life, started to fall sick and die. Worse still, the villagers themselves began to suffer. Many people fell ill with strange symptoms that no one had ever seen before. It was a dark and frightening time for everyone. The villagers were scared and confused. They didn't know what was causing this sudden misfortune. They had always followed their traditions and respected the gods, or so they thought. Desperate for answers, they decided to consult the oracle, Abele, known for his wisdom and connection to the spiritual world. The villagers gathered at Abele's, their faces filled with worry. The elders spoke first, explaining the situation and asking Abele what could be done to stop the curse. Abele listened carefully, his eyes closed as if in deep thought. After a long silence, he finally spoke. "The gods are angry," Abele said solemnly. "They are displeased with the village because the traditions have been broken. The purity that was once so precious has been lost. To appease the gods, a great sacrifice must be made. 2 young virgins must carry the sacrifice to the sacred altar." The villagers gasped in shock. The idea of a sacrifice was serious, but even more shocking was the mention of virgins. The village elders, who had always believed that all the young girls were pure, were worried. They had trusted that their traditions were being followed, but now they weren't so sure. Abele continued, "The sacrifice must be made within 2 days, or the curse will grow stronger, and more suffering will befall the village. The villagers left Abelé's house with heavy hearts, filled with worry. They knew they had to act quickly to find 2 young virgins for the sacrifice. The village had always prided itself on the purity of its daughters, but now, with the strange behaviors of recent months, doubts began to creep into their minds. Their once unshakable belief in their traditions was shaken, and the weight of the curse pressed down on them all. The next morning, the village crier went through the village, ringing his bell and shouting, "All young girls must go to the palace! All young girls must go to the palace!" His voice echoed through the streets, and soon every family heard the call. The villagers knew this was about the important sacrifice Abelé had spoken of. So, the following day, all the girls and their parents went to the palace. When the virginity pot test was conducted for all the girls by Abelé, they discovered that not a single girl in the village was still a virgin. Isime had turned them all into prostitutes. Back in the present, Abelé's voice broke the long silence of the story. "The gods see everything," he said gravely. "Their anger is clear. We must continue the search, for without the sacrifice, the curse will not be lifted." The villagers realized the gravity of the situation. The purity they had taken for granted was gone, and the girls who were supposed to represent the pride and tradition of the village had failed the test. Now they faced the harsh reality that finding the right young girls might be more difficult than they had thought. The weight of the curse felt heavier than ever, and the village was filled with a sense of fear and urgency. The blame quickly shifted to Isime, who had become the symbol of everything that had gone wrong. The villagers believed her influence had led the girls astray, causing them to abandon their traditions and bring the gods' wrath upon them. The elders shook their heads, filled with disappointment and anger. Isime's parents, who lived in the city, soon heard about the trouble their daughter had caused. They were shocked and ashamed. Her father, a stern man who believed in discipline, was furious. "We should have raised her better," he said, his voice full of regret. "We were too lenient, and now she has brought shame upon us." Isime's mother, who had often defended her daughter's actions, felt deep sadness. "I should have been stricter," she admitted. "I let her do whatever she wanted because she was our only child. Now look at the mess she's caused." As the villagers continued to talk, Isime felt the weight of their blame. She realized the impact of her actions and the trouble she had caused. The girl once admired from the city was now seen as the root of all the problems in Cambolé. The villagers demanded that she take responsibility, believing she was the one who had led their daughters to break the sacred traditions. The village was in turmoil, and the blame on Isime grew heavier each day. Her influence had led the girls away from their values, and now the village was suffering the consequences. The elders decided that something had to be done to restore order and reconcile with the gods. The fate of the village rested on what would happen next, and all eyes were on Isime to see how she would face the consequences of her actions. The elders and villagers gathered to decide what to do. With no young virgin found, and the curse still weighing on the village, they turned to Isime, whom they believed was responsible for this misfortune. The decision was made. Isime would carry the sacrifice alone, as penance for the chaos she had caused. Isime stood before the village, feeling a mix of fear and regret. She looked at the faces of the villagers, all filled with anger and disappointment. Her parents, who had rushed from the city, stood helplessly by her side. They could not protect her from the consequences of her actions. The oracle, Abelé, handed her a calabash filled with offerings for the gods. "You must carry it to the sacred altar in the forest," he said. "You will walk alone. This is your burden to bear." With the heavy calabash on her head, Isime began her journey. She walked through the village, passing the disapproving stares and murmurs of the people. As she entered the dense forest, she truly felt alone. The trees closed in around her, and the path grew more difficult. For days, she walked without rest, her feet sore, and her mind heavy. Along the way, Isime reflected on everything that had happened. She remembered the excitement and attention she had received from men, how the village girls had admired her and wanted to be like her. She now realized how shallow and fleeting that attention was. It had led them all astray, away from the values and traditions that had kept the village safe and its people happy. Tears streamed down Isime's face as she continued walking. She felt deep regret for the harm she had caused. not only to herself, but to the entire village. She understood now that her actions had consequences, and those consequences had brought suffering to everyone. Finally, exhausted and weary, Isime reached the sacred altar deep in the forest. She placed the calabash on the altar and knelt before it, crying out to the gods for forgiveness. She prayed that the curse would be lifted and that the village would find peace again. At that moment, Isime felt the full weight of her actions and the pain they had caused. As she stood to leave, a quiet sense of acceptance came over her. She knew she had to face what came next with courage, even if it meant being separated from her family and the life she had once known. Isime's journey was not just physical. It was a journey of realization and repentance, and she hoped that somehow the village could heal from the wounds her actions had caused. After completing her journey, Isime returned to the village. As she walked through the forest and back to Cambole, she noticed a change in the air. The villagers gathered, watching her with a mix of relief and lingering anger. The plants that had wilted began to show signs of life, and the sick animals started to recover. The curse had been lifted, but the consequences for Isime were far from over. The elders stood before the village, and Abele spoke. "The gods have accepted the sacrifice," he announced. "The curse is lifted, but Isime must face the consequences of her actions. She will not be allowed to leave the village for 12 years. During this time, she will be responsible for carrying all sacrifices to the gods." The villagers murmured their agreement. They were relieved that the curse had ended, but still harbored resentment toward Isime. As part of her punishment, Isime was assigned to a small hut near the shrine, isolated from the rest of the village. The villagers shunned her, and she was treated as an outcast. Isime spent her days fulfilling her duties, carrying sacrifices and tending to the shrine. She lived in solitude, reflecting on the choices she had made and the lives she had affected. The once joyful, vibrant girl from the city was now a shadow of herself, burdened by the weight of her past actions. The village, meanwhile, worked to restore its traditions. They reinforced the importance of purity and respect for their cultural values to protect their way of life. The elders decided that no one from the city would be allowed to enter Cambole again. They wanted to ensure that the mistakes of the past would not be repeated. Isime's story became a moral tale for the children of Cambole. Parents told their children the story of the girl from the city who brought trouble to their village. They spoke of the importance of respecting traditions and making good choices. Isime's life served as a reminder of the consequences of straying from the path of respect and honor. For 12 long years, Isime remained in the isolated hut, alone. She lived with the regret of her actions and the knowledge that she had brought shame upon herself and her family. Her punishment was not just physical, but also a profound emotional and spiritual journey. She learned that true beauty and value come from within, and that respecting one's culture and traditions is vital. Over time, the village slowly healed, but the memory of what had happened stayed with them. Isime's story was passed down from generation to generation as a lesson in humility, respect, and the importance of making wise choices. It was a sad ending for Isime, but also a lesson learned for the village of Cambole, reminding them of the strength and value of their cultural heritage. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you did, please give the video a thumbs up, comment on what you learned from this tale, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more enchanting stories like this one. Thank you.